They tried to break him, but they didn't realize his soul was made of titanium and fire. Witness the incredible resilience of a human spirit that refuses to be contained or controlled. Hit subscribe today and find the unbreakable power within your own heart. The email came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I was still awake, sitting on the floor of my father's pharmacy, surrounded by 30 years of his life packed into cardboard boxes. My aunt had given me until Friday to clear out her property. 3 days. That's what she decided my father's entire legacy was worth. I read the email twice. Then I sat very still for a long time. It was from my father's old AOL account. He had sent it to me 14 months earlier, 2 days before his stroke. The subject line said, "For Claire, just in case." Inside was a single PDF attachment. No message, just the file. I opened it. I didn't scream. My father's name was Raymond. He built Hale's Pharmacy from nothing, a single storefront on Clemson Avenue in Macon, Georgia, that he opened the year I was born. By the time I was in middle school, it had expanded into the building next door. By the time I graduated nursing school, it had a loyal customer base of over 800 families who trusted my father the way people used to trust family doctors. He knew everyone's name. He knew their children's names. He kept a jar of lemon drops on the counter for the elderly customers who came in just to have someone to talk to. My mother passed when I was 9. After that, it was just my father and me, and my Aunt Renata. Renata was my father's younger sister by 6 years. She was charming in the way that people are charming when they need something from you: warm smiles, loud laughs, always the first to offer help and the last to actually deliver it. Growing up, I thought I liked her. She remembered my birthday. She brought good wine to Christmas. She called my father Ray Ray in a way that made him laugh every time, even though he was 61 years old and a serious man. What I didn't understand until much later was that Renata had been watching my father's pharmacy the way a hawk watches a field mouse. Patient, unhurried, waiting. My father had his first stroke in March. It was mild, the doctor said. He recovered most of his speech and all of his mobility, but it scared him. He was 64, and for the first time in his life, Raymond Hale started thinking about what happened after. I was living 40 minutes away in Atlanta at the time, working night shifts at Emory. I drove down every weekend. I helped him sort through paperwork, set up his online banking, organize his insurance documents. He was meticulous about records, always had been. Everything dated, everything filed, everything backed up. What I didn't know was that Renata had started coming around during the week, the days I wasn't there. My father had his second stroke in May. This one was not mild. He survived, but the man who came home from the hospital 3 weeks later was quieter than the man who had gone in. He tired easily. He got confused sometimes in the evenings. He needed help. And Renata, to her credit or so, I believe, stepped in. She offered to manage the pharmacy's daily operations while I handled his medical care. She said she wanted to help. She said family was everything. I believed her. That was my mistake. Not the only one, but the first. My father passed on a Saturday morning in September, quietly, in his own bed, with me holding his hand. He had been declining for 3 weeks, and we both knew the direction things were going. We had time to say what needed to be said. That part, at least, I am grateful for. Renata arrived at the house 2 hours later. She cried. She hugged me. She said all the right things. Then, 4 days after we buried my father, she called me into the living room of his house, set a manila envelope on the coffee table, and slid it toward me with 2 fingers. Ray updated his will in June, she said. He wanted the pharmacy and the building to go to me since I've been running it. He left you the house and his savings account. It's all in there. I had it notarized. I looked at the envelope. I looked at her face. I didn't know he updated his will, I said. He didn't want to upset you. She folded her hands in her lap. He knew you had your career. He didn't want you to feel obligated to come back here and run a pharmacy. There was something careful in the way she said it, rehearsed, like she had practiced the words enough times that they had lost their natural shape. I picked up the envelope. I read the document inside. My father's signature was at the bottom, next to a notary stamp dated June 14th. June 14th. I remembered June 14th. I had been at the pharmacy that afternoon. My father and I had eaten lunch together at the diner across the street. He had ordered the same thing he always ordered: grilled cheese, tomato soup, black coffee, and we had talked for almost 2 hours about nothing in particular. Old movies, a book he was reading, whether I should get a dog. He had not mentioned updating his will. He had not seemed like a man who had just signed away his life's work. I put the document back in the envelope. I set it on the coffee table. I need some time to process this, I said. Renata nodded, sympathetic. already relaxing into the cushions like a woman who had just finished a difficult task. "Of course," she said. "Take all the time you need." She gave me until Friday. The notice arrived Wednesday morning, a formal letter from Renata's attorney informing me that as the new owner of the commercial property at 1140 Clemson Avenue, Miss Renata Hale was initiating a transfer of operational control, effective immediately, and requesting that I remove any personal belongings from the premises by end of business Friday. I drove to the pharmacy that evening after my shift. I let myself in with the key I still had. I walked through the aisles my father had built, past the blood pressure monitors and the reading glasses display and the lemon drops on the counter. I sat down on the floor in the back office, surrounded by boxes, and I stared at the wall for a very long time. And then, at 11:47 p.m., my phone lit up. The email had been sitting in my inbox for 14 months. My father had sent it before his first stroke fully registered, before the fear settled in, before Renata started coming around on Wednesdays and Thursdays. He had sent it quietly, without explanation, the way a careful man leaves a spare key somewhere safe. The PDF was 63 pages long. It was his will, the real one, dated February 28th, prepared by a Macon attorney named Gerald Pitts, signed and witnessed and notarized with the kind of thoroughness that was entirely my father's character. The pharmacy and the building went to me. The house went to me. A small bequest to his church, a small bequest to his longtime pharmacist Marcus, and everything else to me, his only child. I read it 3 times. Then I took a screenshot of the sent timestamp on the original email 11:03 p.m., August 9th of last year, and I sat with that information for a while. Then I opened my contacts and looked up Gerald Pitts. I called him at 8 the next morning. He remembered my father immediately, warmly, the way people always remembered Raymond Hale. "Mr. Pitts," I said, "I need to ask you about my father's will." There was a brief pause. "I've been wondering when I'd hear from you," he said. Gerald Pitts had prepared my father's will in February. He had also, in late June, received a phone call from a woman identifying herself as Raymond Hale's daughter, requesting a copy of the document for estate planning purposes. He had not released it attorney-client privilege, but the call had made him uneasy. He had been waiting to see what would happen at the reading. There had been no reading. Renata had presented her document privately, without an attorney present, without notifying Gerald Pitts, without contacting the probate court. She had moved fast and she had moved quiet, the way people do when they know the window is short. "The will she showed me," I said. "It's dated June 14th. My father and I had lunch that day." Gerald Pitts was quiet for a moment. "Can you come in this afternoon?" I went in that afternoon. I brought the original email, printed on paper, with the timestamp visible. I brought 3 photographs I'd found on my phone from June 14th, my father and I at the diner, his grilled cheese, the little vase of plastic flowers on the table, timestamped by my phone's camera. Noon to 2:15 p.m. Gerald Pitts looked at everything carefully. Then he looked at me over his reading glasses. "The notary stamp on the document your aunt presented," he said, "is from a firm in Columbus. That's 90 miles from here." He paused. "Your father never drove after his first stroke." I thought about that. "Who took him to Columbus?" I said. Neither of us answered. Gerald Pitts made some phone calls that afternoon. I made some of my own. I called Marcus, my father's pharmacist, who told me quietly that Renata had been removing cash from the register on Fridays for operational expenses since July, amounts between $800 and $1,200, never receipted, never logged. I called my father's bank, identified myself as next of kin with a copy of the real will, and learned that a wire transfer of $34,000 had been initiated from the pharmacy's business account the week after my father's funeral. The transfer had gone to an LLC registered in Florida. I looked up the LLC. It had been registered in Renata's married name, which I almost didn't recognize because she had been divorced for 11 years. I wrote everything down: dates, amounts, account numbers, the name of the Florida LLC. I took photographs of the pharmacy's paper ledger, which Marcus had kept fastidiously and which showed exactly where the money had gone and hadn't gone. I didn't confront Renata. I didn't call her. I sent her a brief text saying I needed a little more time, and she replied with a smiley face and a reminder about Friday's deadline. I spent Thursday very quietly. Gerald Pitts had contacted the Georgia Secretary of State's office and a forensic document examiner he knew professionally. The examiner agreed to a preliminary review of the will Renata had presented. The notary stamp, it turned out, belonged to a notary whose license had lapsed in April, 2 months before the document was allegedly signed. The signature on the will didn't match my father's signature on file with Gerald's office or on his pharmacy license, or on his bank documents. The line pressure was wrong. The letter spacing was wrong. My father had not signed that document. Someone had signed it for him. Friday arrived. Renata had scheduled a formal transfer meeting at her attorney's office for 2 o'clock, a clean, official handoff of operational control. She'd told Marcus, who had told me, because Marcus had been working for my father for 19 years and had no intention of being loyal to someone else. The attorney's name was Todd Blevins. His office was on Riverside Drive, 3rd floor, a nice view of the water. I arrived at 1:45. I was wearing my father's favorite color, which was navy blue. I had his watch on my wrist, a Seiko he'd had since before I was born, scratched crystal, still keeping perfect time. I carried a folder with Gerald Pitts walking beside me, and behind us came a woman from the Bibb County District Attorney's Office named Specialist Denise Holt, who had been briefed that morning and who carried her own considerably thicker folder. The receptionist asked if we had an appointment. "We're here for the Hale estate transfer," Gerald said pleasantly. We were shown to the conference room. Renata was already there, seated at the far end of the table in a cream blazer, her reading glasses on, a pen in her hand. Her attorney, Todd Blevins, sat beside her with a stack of transfer documents already laid out. She looked up when we walked in. She saw me first, then she saw Gerald Pitts, then she saw Specialist Holt. The color in her face went somewhere else entirely. "Claire," she said. Her voice was perfectly controlled. "I had to admire that. I didn't know you were bringing—" "I brought my father's attorney," I said, "and I brought someone from the DA's office." I sat down across from her. I put my folder on the table. "I thought we should all be here for this." Todd Blevins leaned toward Renata and murmured something. She murmured something back. He cleared his throat. "Miss Hale, my client has a valid, notarized—" "The notary's license was lapsed," Gerald said, opening his own folder. He slid a document across the table. "By 2 months. Here's the state licensing record." He slid another page. "Here's the signature comparison from the forensic examiner. And here another page is the original will, prepared by my office in February, which names Claire Hale as sole beneficiary of the pharmacy, the commercial property, and the estate." Renata was looking at the table. "There's also the matter," Specialist Holt said, in a voice that was very calm and very even, "of a $34,000 wire transfer from the pharmacy's business account, initiated 6 days after Raymond Hale's death, to an LLC registered under the name Renata Voss." She opened her own folder. "We've been in contact with the bank. The transfer authorization signature doesn't match Raymond Hale's signature on file. It matches the same handwriting as the contested will." The room was very quiet. Todd Blevins put down his pen. "I'd like a moment with my client," he said. "Of course," Specialist Holt said. Gerald and I stepped into the hallway. Through the closed door, I could hear Renata's voice, low and tight. I couldn't make out words. I stood by the window and looked at the river, and thought about my father eating grilled cheese on June 14th, talking about old movies, not knowing what his sister was already planning. I thought about how careful he had been, how he had scanned that document at 11 p.m. on an August night and sent it to me without explanation, because he was a thorough man who prepared for contingencies, who had raised a daughter alone and built a business from nothing and kept records of everything. For Claire, just in case, he had known something wasn't right. Maybe not the specifics, but he had known. Gerald touched my arm. "You doing okay?" "Yes," I said, and I meant it. We went back in 20 minutes later. Todd Blevins looked like a man who had aged considerably in a short period of time. Renata was sitting very still with her hands in her lap. The transfer documents were not signed. Specialist Holt informed Renata that she would be receiving a formal notice from the DA's office regarding the wire fraud and the forged documents. The pharmacy remained under the authority of the legitimate estate. Gerald filed the emergency motion to validate the original will with the probate court that same afternoon. Renata didn't look at me when she left. I don't know exactly what I expected to feel in that moment. Triumph, maybe. Relief. Some clean, bright thing. Mostly I felt tired. And sad. Not for myself or my father, who had trusted his sister, who had let her into his business and his home during the worst months of his life, who had probably suspected something in that quiet way he had of noticing things without saying them aloud, and who had done the only thing he could. He had made sure I had what I needed to protect myself. He had kept records. He had sent the email. He had trusted me to figure out the rest. The probate court validated my father's original will 11 days later. The pharmacy and the building and the house all passed to me, legally and cleanly, exactly as he had intended. Marcus stayed on as head pharmacist. We rehired the 2 part-time staff members Renata had let go in October. I ordered a new jar of lemon drops for the counter. The DA's office moved forward with charges wire fraud, Forgery of a legal instrument. Theft by taking. Renata's Florida LLC was frozen, pending investigation. Todd Blevins quietly withdrew from her representation. I don't think about Renata much. I think about my father. I think about the kind of man who builds something slowly and carefully over 30 years and makes sure, at the end, that it goes to the right person. I keep records now, of everything. It's the most important thing he taught me, even though he never said it directly. He just showed me. The jar of lemon drops sits on the counter where it always has. The elderly customers still come in on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. They ask about my father. I tell them what I can. Sometimes they stay a while just to talk, and I let them, because that's what the pharmacy has always been for. I'm not going anywhere.